Hello everyone, welcome back. It's Empyrion Galactic Survival episode 64. I'm Enigmius and today we're continuing precisely where we left off after the last episode, building the Manta assault hover. It's another assault hover. The purpose for the ship is not really the motivating factor behind this build, it's the aesthetic, and I had this idea in my head of something that I wanted to build, so that's what we're doing. That's the basic reasoning behind it. Currently, with the way the game is set up, the idea of an assault hover is really, to my way of thinking, the only reason to have a hover vessel is if you're looking at going and messing up some points of interest, or, you know, having something that you can take with you to do some mining and have the turrets on it to look after itself. We've talked about this lots. It's just one of those things. Today, we're focusing on the transition from the back of the ship to the sides of the ship. We're also going to be looking at filling in the rings where the thrusters are going to go so that we can place a few thrusters, get a feel for how it's going to look, and if we need to make some changes, we can do that. You can see now we're just kind of extending those rings back a little bit so that we'll have some room to place the thrusters without them sticking out into no man's land, so to speak. And you can see we're using some of the new blocks, not a lot of them. Sometimes it's fun when we get new blocks, as we just recently did, to just kind of mess around with them, plunk them down and see what you can do with them. In this case, using the new blocks for the sake of using them, for me, is not a very good reason. It's not something that's going to make me happy. Using them because they make sense for what I'm doing, that's going to make me happy. And so far, we've found some situations where it does make a lot of sense to use some of these blocks, so that's what we're doing. One thing to keep in mind, with the next update, of the time this video is being made, the ship-mounted mining tools are going to be released. And to be completely honest with you, off the top of my head, I don't remember if they come. I think they go on a hover vessel. If my memory serves, if I'm wrong, it'll be on a small vessel. It's certainly not on a capital vessel, and no, you won't be able to put auto miners on your base. But the whole idea is that we're going to have tools that we can attach to ships that would hopefully make mining a little bit faster and easier. It's in testing right now, in the development build, and it should be going live within the next week if everything goes according to plan. We'll be building a special ship just for the auto mining. This ship that we're looking at will be too big. The last hover that we made would be too big. I want to make a purpose-built ship specifically for the tool so that we can match it for the job that we're trying to do and the size of the tool itself. And then we'll go from there. And just in case you're wondering, if you've been watching the patch notes or if you've been messing around in the development branch, that's kind of the idea there, is we're going to be doing an entirely separate ship for that, and we're going to be doing it off Masperon. I don't know what planet we're going to yet. It'll be a planet that has iron, because we're almost completely out, but that's something to keep in mind going forward, is that we are going to be doing that. It just won't be on this build at all. Now you can see here we're basically finishing off the rings and closing them off so that they'll be easy to place the thrusters, and also a little bit of a buffer between the thrusters and the rest of the interior of the ship, because that's basically how it's going to turn out, is the interior of the ship is going to start where that firewall of sorts ends, and then we'll go from there. In case you missed it, I guess I should point out, if you missed the last episode, there's a few things to keep in mind. One, that it's just running at twice the normal speed, and it's done just to try and keep things a little bit more interesting. We've got a lot of blocks being placed and spun around. Watching that at normal speed kind of gets a little bit dull after a while, but speeding it up makes it a little bit easier without going so fast that you can't see what's going on. And also, for the most part, I've edited out all of the menus that pop up. If I'm popping up a menu to pick a block, a texture, or a paint color, I've tried to edit all of those out so that we don't have that distraction of those popping up constantly and making things more difficult than they need to be. And lastly, the ship is upside down currently, not because we wanted it to be, but because that's how it ended up. Once we get the underside of the ship complete, or pretty close to it, we'll flip it right side up and continue with the build that way. But just so as you're watching, if you're wondering why things look a little bit wonky, that's because the ship is upside down. Now you can see I put the blue texture on the inside of this thing. That's not a paint, that's actually the texture, and I use it so that when you paint on it, you get this flat, no shine sort of texture when you do paint on it. So when we're painting it with a black like this, it's just this matte black that's going to be where the thrusters are housed, so that it doesn't draw attention to the black on the ring. All you'll really be able to see are the thruster nozzles, and when the thrusters are turned on, the plume from the back of the thrusters, without anything else sort of distracting you, which is the entire goal of this whole thing. Is we want the interior of these rings to be as inconspicuous as possible, and then once we've got it set up that way, then we can place the thrusters, and it's so much easier to place them when you've got the texture and the paint done, as opposed to doing the texture and the paint and then placing the thrusters and then trying to do the texture and the paint. I do that so much with guns. It's just not a very good setup. It's not a very good way to approach it. Now, this is basically right side up, how the ship would be looking so far if we had it right side up. I don't have enough thrusters to do all of the thrusters in the rings yet. I'm making them as fast as I can. I actually had to go and get some iron out of our capital vessel and put it into the constructor in our base so that I could continue making the thrusters that we need. I will have enough on the ship before we take it out for the first time, but for now, if you're wondering why there are gaps anywhere or why anything is incomplete, that's why. It's because we're running out of materials and we're just doing what we can to get through. We still have to do the reverse thrusters and the side thrusters, but for now, we're doing okay. We're doing okay, and you can see we place them, and then once we paint them, you don't really change the nozzle color, but the block that the nozzle is attached to, that color changes, so that by the time you've gone around and painted all of the thrusters, now the blocks are black, and they're sitting in this recessed black area. It's really just the ends of the nozzles you see, which is exactly what I wanted, and it works out well. It's nice when things work out exactly the way that you want them to. With that done, you can see, you get an idea of how many thrusters we're going to have on this ship once everything is in place. Now it's time to finish the side transition, the transitions from the rear to the side of the ship, because, as I mentioned in the last episode, very important. If we're going to do the kinds of things that I want on this ship, to have this taken care of in a way that I'm happy with now, so that if I decide later that I want to change it, that's fine. But if I decide later that it's good, then it's so much the better. I don't have to do so much redoing of things. I don't have to resculpt things because I did a poor job when I originally did it, knowing that it was a poor job. You get the idea. It's good to kind of spend the time up front, and then if you decide that you want to change it, then you change it because you wanted to, as opposed to changing because you had to, because we did it half-assed to start. There's only so much that we can do with transitions in a voxel-based game like this. We're given the shapes to work with. As time goes on, we're getting more and more shapes to work with, which is wonderful. But at the end of the day, we're not going to have complex curves, seamless curves where you don't see any straight lines or anything like that over wide areas, just because that's not the nature of the beast. But we can still kind of take a look at what we've got in terms of angles and shapes so that we can make those transitions look as interesting as possible and kind of they make sense, which in this case is doing pretty well. We're able to put all these things down in a way that makes sense. And now in the next episode, we're going to be focusing on the sides of the ship and the underside of the ship, which is currently the top of the ship. You get the idea. What I want to do is I want to get everything done on the bottom of the ship so that I can place the thruster engines, the boosters, and the landing gears while the ship is upside down, while it's nice and easy, and then we can flip it right side up and not have to worry about those guys because they're done. But for now, we're bringing this out a little bit farther. You can see now it's lining up with that sort of frame that we did that followed the outside perimeter of the hull. And that gives us a really good place to start from when we do start working on the sides and all of those other kinds of details. We don't have to worry about how we're going to manage that transition because it's done. Simple and easy. So, if you want to be notified about the next episode and all those things that we're going to be doing, the easiest way to do that is to subscribe to my channel or follow me on social media. Links for social media are in the information box below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.